15 years of marriage, and she thought she could erase me with a single text. Welcome to Revenge with Ethan, the channel where we share stories of justice. Stories about ordinary people taking back what's theirs without shouting or making a scene. Today I'm bringing you the story of James Whitaker, a 54-year-old forensic accountant from Des Moines, Iowa. His wife, Claire, left him during a so-called girls' trip, emptied their joint account of $300,000, and declared she'd found someone better. But Claire had no idea that James had been quietly preparing for years. With patience and smarts, he let the truth come to light, delivering justice in the quietest way possible. My name is James Whitaker, 54 years old, living in Des Moines, Iowa. I'm a forensic accountant, a job most people think is just dry numbers and endless spreadsheets. But I love it, because as my father used to say while we fixed the fence out back at his place in Ankeny, numbers never lie, no matter what people do. That night, I stood in the kitchen of my downtown condo, the neon glow from Grand Avenue spilling across the cold granite countertop. The clock on the wall, a gift from my father before he passed, ticked steadily. It wasn't anything fancy, just an old leather-strapped timepiece with a scratched face, but I looked to it whenever I needed to stay grounded. It was 11:42 p.m. on a Thursday, the kind of hour when folks are usually fast asleep or catching the final quarter of an Iowa Hawkeyes football game on ESPN. I held a mug of cold coffee, brewed that morning in the French press. Claire always called, too fussy. My phone lit up, buzzing softly on the counter. A text from Claire, my wife, who was supposed to be on day 4 of a girls' trip in Palm Springs. I opened the message, and everything seemed to slow down. I'm not coming back, James. I've met someone better. Your stuff's been moved to storage. Attached was a screenshot. $300,000 transferred from our joint savings to her personal account. $118,000, the money I'd saved through late nights at the office. 300-mile drives to Chicago for audits. Weekends I'd skip to close deals. 15 years of marriage, gone in 2 sentences, and a screenshot. I set the phone down and took a sip of cold coffee. My heart didn't race. I didn't punch the wall or yell. I just looked at my father's clock, listening to its steady ticks. Claire thought I'd crumble, that I'd call her right away to argue, or beg. She was wrong. They're always wrong when they think I'm just some boring accountant buried in numbers. I stood up, poured more coffee, knowing I wouldn't sleep tonight. The condo was quiet, just the clocks ticking, and the faint hum of cars on the street below. I opened my laptop and logged into a private email account Claire didn't know about. 3 alerts from my bank's security system. Someone had tried to change the passwords on accounts she couldn't touch. Claire had been thorough. I'll give her that. She thought she had every angle covered. I texted back 2 words. Good luck. Then I called my brother Mark, who works in digital security in Cedar Rapids, 120 miles east of Des Moines. Remember that contingency plan we talked about 5 years ago? I said, when Mark picked up, his voice groggy. You're calling me this late, so it's gotta be big. Mark replied, suddenly alert. What's going on, James? Claire just made her move, I said. It's time. You sure? Mark asked, cautious. Sure, I said. As sure as numbers adding up. I hung up and glanced at the wedding photo on the living room wall. The only picture left in the condo that still had both me and Claire in it. She'd slowly replaced the others with shots from her yoga studio or trips with her influencer friends. I should have seen it sooner, but as my father used to say, sitting by the Des Moines River, son, nobody sees clear when they're standing in the storm. I met Claire Sullivan at a University of Iowa alumni event, right at Kinnick Stadium in Iowa City. I was 38, fresh off a short-lived first marriage, pouring everything into building my forensic accounting firm. Claire was 34, radiant as a September afternoon, with a smile that turned heads across the room. She worked part-time at a gym, dreaming of opening her own yoga studio, and had zero interest in what I did for a living. I don't need the details, James. She'd laugh when I tried to explain a case I'd cracked. Just keep making enough for us to live well. I found that charming. Back then. We got married after a year of dating, in a small ceremony at Waterworks Park, right along the Des Moines River. We asked Claire open her yoga studio in West Des Moines, covering the full $75,000 from my savings. No questions asked. When she wanted a bigger house in Jordan Creek, the backyard overlooking the lake, I nodded. Alexis, vacations to Key West or the Bahamas. I signed the checks without a work-getting meetings. I'm a forensic accountant. Spotting discrepancies is what I do. Claire called me her guy, and I believed it. But my father, a retired auto mechanic in Ankeny, warned me once while we were painting his porch. It was a hot day, probably 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Sweat dripping down his brow. James, your wife spends a lot of your money, he said, pausing his paintbrush. Just make sure she values what you do to earn it. Claire just likes the good life, Dad, I said, brushing it off. But his words stuck, like the scratches on his old clock. 6 years into our marriage, I started quietly protecting my assets. Not out of suspicion, but because of a forensic accountant's instinct, always have a backup plan. I set up 2 LLCs, created trusts, invested in crypto through a cold wallet, and kept a few offshore accounts for international clients. Claire only knew about our joint account, $200,000 for daily expenses and whatever she wanted. She never asked for more, and I never told her. The signs of betrayal crept in slowly, like cracks in a windshield. Claire got obsessed with the fitness influencer world. Her Instagram filled with yoga poses on beaches, green juice shots, and quotes about self-love. Weekend trips with her wellness community stretched into full weeks. You wouldn't enjoy it, James, she'd say, waving me off when I asked. It's all yoga talk and healthy living. I noticed other things. New clothes she bought, but never wore at home. Phone calls she'd cut short when I walked in. Late nights at the studio blamed on lit. I said nothing. Maybe that was my first mistake. Or maybe my first mistake was marrying someone who thought my job was just boring numbers. Last Christmas, Claire forgot my birthday. I mentioned it the next day, and she laughed, rushing out to buy an expensive fossil watch. I've been so busy with the studio expansion, honey, she said, kissing my cheek. I took the watch, but that night I sat in my home office staring at my father's clock on the desk and finalizing my contingency plan. Deep down, I knew this day was coming. The night Claire sent that text, I stepped onto the condo balcony, looking out at the Des Moines River shimmering under the moonlight. The Iowa State Capitol glowed in the distance, a beacon in this quiet city. I thought about the last 15 years, the nights I worked until dawn to pay the bills, the times I nodded when Claire wanted another trip, the moments at Belmont, the moments I told myself she still loved me. But now, I was done fooling myself. I took a final sip of coffee, went back to the kitchen, and looked at my father's clock again. They think I'll give up, I thought, as if speaking to him, but they're wrong. Justice doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be timed right, and my time had come. Justice doesn't come overnight, but I knew it would come if I played every move right. The night Claire sent that text, I stood on the balcony of my condo, watching the Des Moines River shimmer under the moonlight. The Iowa State Capitol glowed in the distance, a reminder that everything in this city had an order, even when my life had just been turned upside down. My father's clock ticked steadily in the kitchen, each sound whispering his old words. The truth always finds a way out. I didn't need to rush. I didn't need to yell or strike back right away. Claire thought she'd won, but she didn't know I'd been preparing for years. They always underestimated me, and that would be their biggest mistake. I went back to the kitchen, set my coffee mug down, and opened my laptop again. Justice doesn't come from emotion. It comes from numbers, from evidence, and from patience. It was time to begin. Hey everyone, this is Revenge with Ethan, and we're diving back into the story of James Whitaker, the man whose wife Claire drained $300,000 from their joint account and left him during a so-called girls' trip. But James didn't break. He started a quiet, calculated plan to take back what was his. Stick around to see how he pulls it off. And if you think James is on the right track, drop a 1 in the comments below to let us know. The next morning, I woke up early, as always. Even though I'd barely slept a few hours, habits die hard, even when your world's been shattered. I brewed coffee, watching the French press drip dark liquid into my mug. Outside the window, Des Moines was stirring, joggers along the Des Moines River, delivery trucks rumbling over the Saylorville Bridge. I grabbed my coffee, hopped into my Ford F-150, and drove through downtown, stopping at Java Joe's on 4th Street. The Americano burned my hand, but it kept me sharp. I wasn't in a hurry. Justice didn't need speed, just precision. Back at my office in West Des Moines, I settled at my desk, surrounded by computer screens filled with Excel spreadsheets and audit reports. The office was small, with cubicles separated by glass partitions, an old coffee machine humming in the corner, and the low buzz of colleagues debating last weekend's Hawkeyes game. I liked its familiarity, like how numbers always fell into place, no matter how messy people got. Susan, my assistant, walked in and dropped a stack of files on my desk. You look a little rough this morning, James, she said, raising an eyebrow. Everything okay? Fine, I replied, flashing a thin smile. Just a long night. Susan nodded, but her eyes lingered, like she wanted to ask more. She'd worked with me for nearly a decade, long enough to know when I wasn't in the mood to talk. I opened my personal laptop and logged into my private financial management system, a custom version of the software I used for the firm, tailored to track my personal assets. With a few clicks, I activated the contingency protocol Mark and I had designed 5 years ago. First, I froze all joint accounts, savings, checking, and the 3 credit cards Claire used for shopping sprees at Jordan Creek Mall. I filed a fraud alert on the $300,000 transfer, leveraging a contact at Wells Fargo to expedite the process. I didn't want the money back yet. I wanted it locked, so Claire would feel the weight of her actions. I drafted an email to my lawyer, Tom Bradley, attaching documents proving Claire's financial misconduct, with instructions to file for divorce immediately. They thought I wouldn't notice, I muttered, glancing at my father's clock on my wrist. But I saw everything. I called my mother, Margaret, at her small house in Ankeny, 10 miles north of the office. Mom was a woman of few words, but always knew when I needed her. Claire left me, I said, my voice steady. She took $300,000 and moved my stuff out while she was supposedly on vacation. Mom was quiet for a moment, only the sound of her soft breathing coming through the phone. I'm sorry, James, she said finally, but I'm not surprised. What are you going to do? What I've been preparing for, I replied. Protect what's mine. Be careful, son, she said, her voice low, but I trust you know what you're doing. I hung up, feeling a quiet relief from hearing her voice. Mom never pushed me to explain, but she was always there, like a light in the window when I needed to come home. That noon, I drove to Jethro's BBQ on Drake Avenue, ordering a smoked brisket sandwich with fries. The place was packed, full of folks in Hawkeyes gear talking about the upcoming game against Nebraska. I sat at the counter, opened my laptop, and dug deeper, using financial databases only licensed investigators could access. I pulled everything I could on Ryan Caldwell, the fitness influencer Claire kept tagging on Instagram, the someone better she'd mentioned. What I found wasn't surprising. Ryan's gym, Harmon Fitness in West Des Moines, looked flashy with no limits slogans painted on the walls and his face plastered across the entrance. But the books told a different story. 3 maxed-out business credit cards, a $5,000 a month lease he couldn't afford, and a loan for a BMW that Claire had co-signed 2 months earlier. I saved everything to an encrypted folder labeled The Truth. She thought I wouldn't see, I thought, glancing at my father's clock. But numbers never lie. I called Mark again, knowing he was the only one who could help me dig deeper without leaving a trace. I need you to check Harmon Fitness LLC, I said when Mark picked up. Bank records, loans, credit applications, everything. Legal channels only, right? Mark asked, half joking. Of course, I said. We're just connecting dots faster than most. Give me a few hours, Mark said. But James, you okay? This hits heavy. I'm fine, I said. Just do this right. That afternoon, I went back to the office, working as if nothing had happened. Susan came in with a cup of coffee from the office machine. Claire called while you were out, she said. Her voice careful. Said there's a misunderstanding with the accounts, and she needs to talk to you ASAP. If she calls again, I said, not looking up from my screen, tell her to contact my lawyer. Susan nodded, but I caught her glancing at the family photo on my desk. A shot of my parents, Mark and me, by Saylorville Lake 10 years ago. She doesn't deserve you, James, she said softly, before leaving. I didn't respond, but her words made me pause for a second. I opened my desk drawer, pulled out my father's old clock, and set it by my keyboard. It didn't run anymore, but I kept it for the memories. Days when Dad taught me to fix cars, how he balanced his shop's books with a pencil and paper. Honesty is the one thing no one can take, he'd said. Claire took the money, but she couldn't take what Dad left in me. That evening, I drove down I-80, the radio playing Johnny Cash's Folsom Prison Blues. The 50-degree Fahrenheit breeze blew through the window, carrying the smell of hay from fields along the road. I pulled into Waterworks Park, sitting on a wooden bench by the Des Moines River. Memories flooded back like the current. 3 years into our marriage, Claire started changing. She wanted me to work less, take more vacations. But when I offered to join her, she'd laugh. You'd be bored, James. You don't get yoga or social media. I nodded like always. In year 7, she bought a Lexus without asking, saying, we deserve the best. I paid the bill, but set up a trust fund that same day. Last year, when Claire forgot my birthday, I wasn't mad. She bought a Fossil watch to apologize, but I just thought she doesn't know who I am. I remembered when Claire looked at my office and said, "James, you're just a boring numbers guy. Why don't you do something exciting?" I smiled, but mentally cataloged every detail. Mark called back at 10 p.m. While I was at a hotel I'd rented near downtown Des Moines. "Got what you need," he said. Sent it through an encrypted email. "But James, this is bigger than you thought." I opened my laptop and downloaded Mark's files. Harmon Fitness's bank records showed Ryan was drowning. $200,000 in loans from 3 banks, all secured against gym equipment he didn't fully own. But what stopped me cold was a $175,000 loan application, co-signed by Claire 4 months ago. The contract specified joint responsibility with spouse, meaning she'd used our marriage to back the loan without my knowledge. "She put me on the hook," I muttered, looking at my father's clock on the hotel desk. Mark went on, "There's more. She siphoned $80,000 from your joint account to Ryan's accounts over the past year. Small transfers at first, then bigger ones." I wasn't shocked, but the confirmation hit like a punch. Claire hadn't just left me. She'd been planning it for a year, funding her new boyfriend with my money. "Thanks, Mark," I said. "I owe you a beer." "More than a beer," Mark laughed. "But James, watch your back. Claire won't let this slide." The next morning, I met my lawyer Tom at his office near the state capitol. I handed over everything: transfers, loan documents, Mark's emails. "I want to move fast," I said, "before she realizes what's happening." Tom reviewed the files and nodded. "With this loan fraud, we can freeze all shared assets today. She won't touch a dime until the divorce is settled." I nodded, feeling like a chess player making the first move. Claire thought she was ahead, but the board had shifted. I left the office, drove over the Saylorville Bridge, and stopped to watch the river. My father's clock on my wrist reminded me that time was on my side. Justice didn't need haste. It just needed to be exact. I didn't need to shout to be heard. The truth, when it's laid bare, always speaks louder than any words. I left Tom's law office, driving over the Saylorville Bridge, feeling like a chess player who'd just positioned the queen perfectly. Claire thought she'd controlled the board, but she didn't know I'd seen every move she'd made long before. My father's clock ticked steadily on my wrist, as if reminding me that time was always on the side of truth. Over the past few days, I'd frozen our joint accounts, filed fraud alerts, and gathered evidence of Claire's dealings with Ryan Caldwell. I wasn't acting out of anger. I was acting for justice, and justice demanded precision. Now it was time for the numbers to tell their story. Hey everyone, this is Revenge with Ethan, and we're picking up with James Whitaker's story, the man whose wife Claire drained $300,000 from their joint account and betrayed him. After quietly gathering evidence, James is ready to let the truth come to light, and Claire and her new boyfriend Ryan Caldwell are about to learn just how much they underestimated him. Watch how justice unfolds, and if you want to see Claire face the consequences of her actions, drop the word justice in the comments below. That morning I woke earlier than usual, brewing coffee in my temporary hotel room in downtown Des Moines. The first rays of sunlight slipped through the window, illuminating a family photo on the desk. My parents, Mark, and me, taken by Saylorville Lake one summer afternoon a decade ago. My father's clock sat beside it, its scratched face catching the light. I picked it up, thinking of his words. Honesty is the one thing no one can take. Claire had tried to take everything, but she couldn't touch what really mattered. I drove to the office, stopping at Java Joe's for an Americano. Des Moines was peaceful in the early morning, with joggers along the river and church bells ringing downtown. I sat in my truck, listening to a bit of Johnny Cash's Ring of Fire on the radio, feeling like things were falling into place. Today wasn't about letting emotions lead. Today was about letting the truth speak. At the office, I checked an email from Tom. He confirmed the emergency asset protection order had been approved. Every shared asset, from the savings account to the Jordan Creek house, was frozen until the divorce was finalized. Claire had tried accessing the locked account 17 times in the past 24 hours, and even applied for a new credit line using our house as collateral. All denied. I gave a faint smile. She thought I'd let it slide, I muttered, glancing at my father's clock. But she was wrong. Susan walked in, carrying a cup of coffee from the office machine. "Claire called 3 times this morning," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "Said there's a huge misunderstanding and needs to see you right away." "There's no misunderstanding," I replied, eyes fixed on my Excel screen. "Tell her to contact Tom Bradley." Susan nodded, but paused at the door. "James, I don't know what's going on, but she sounded desperate." "Good," I said evenly. "She should." That noon, my phone lit up with Claire's number. I declined the call. 5 minutes later, she called again. Then 3 more times. Finally, a text. James, what the hell did you do? The money's gone, and my cards don't work. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to Jethro's BBQ on Drake Avenue, ordering a brisket sandwich with fries. The place was buzzing, packed with folks in Hawkeye's gear talking about the upcoming game. I sat at the counter, opened my laptop, and checked an update from Mark. Mark had sent more documents, a new lease agreement for Harmon Fitness, co-signed by Claire, with terms tied to marital assets. She hadn't just helped Ryan buy a car, or expand his gym. She'd used my name, our marriage, to back his entire fake empire. I saved the file to my The Truth folder, feeling like a hunter who'd found the final track. They thought I'd overlook it. I thought, glancing at my father's clock on my wrist. But I've documented everything. That afternoon, Susan buzzed through the intercom. James, Claire's in the lobby. She's pretty insistent. Wants to see you now. I sighed, stood up, and walked to the lobby. Claire was there, designer sunglasses pushed up on her head. Yoga outfit perfectly coordinated, but her eyes betrayed strain. She smiled when she saw me. The same smile that used to soften me 15 years ago. James, there's a huge misunderstanding with the bank, she said loudly. Enough for the receptionist and a few colleagues to hear. All our accounts are frozen. No misunderstanding, I said, my voice low but sharp. You transferred $300,000 without permission. The bank flagged it as fraud. Claire's smile vanished. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. That was our joint account. I'm your wife. My soon-to-be ex-wife, I said, locking eyes with her. You emptied our savings, moved my stuff out, and said you found someone better. Did you think I'd just let it go? Her face paled. You're investigating me? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. I'm protecting myself from fraud, I said. And I know everything, Claire. About Ryan. About the loans. About it all. She blinked, stepping back. You can't do this, she said, her voice faltering. I've put deposits down on a new place. I have commitments with Ryan. Commitments, I said, a hint of sarcasm in my tone. You used my name to back his loans. That's not a commitment, Claire. That's fraud. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. We can work this out, she said. Finally, her voice softening. Come home, James. We'll talk. There's no home to go back to, I said, turning away. Good luck. That evening I got an email from Claire's lawyer, demanding access to all financial records, and threatening a lawsuit if I didn't cooperate. An amateur move. I forwarded it to Tom with one line. Proceed as planned. Tom called shortly after. The bank finished its review of the transfer, he said. They confirmed Claire forged your signature on 2 loan documents. They're referring the case to the district attorney. Good, I said. Let them do their job. One more thing, Tom said. Ryan Caldwell just got a call from the bank demanding repayment. He can't cover it, and they're preparing to repossess his gym equipment. I nodded, though Tom couldn't see. They thought I'd stay silent. I thought, looking at my father's clock. But the truth never stays silent. The next day, I drove to Harmon Fitness, unannounced. The gym was sleek, with no limits slogans painted on the walls and Ryan's face plastered across the entrance. Inside, young folks in pricey workout gear took selfies between half-hearted sets. Ryan spotted me right away, tall, with a fake tan and capped teeth, the kind of guy who built a career on looks. You must be James, he said, extending a hand, flashing a perfect smile. Claire's mentioned you. I'm sure she has, I said, ignoring his hand. We need to talk privately. His smile faltered, but he led me to his glass-walled office, soundproof but visible to all. What can I do for you? He asked, closing the door. I placed a folder on his desk. These are all the financial records tying you to Claire. Loans, credit cards, leases, all co-signed using my marital assets. He picked up the folder, flipping through it carefully. I don't understand. It's simple, I said. Claire used our marriage to secure loans for you. Now we're divorcing, and those guarantees are void. His face drained of color. These are all legitimate deals between me and Claire. Maybe, I said, but the bank approved them based on our combined assets and income. Assets she no longer has access to. He closed the folder. What do you want? Nothing from you, I said. Just thought you should know what's coming. The bank will call in those loans soon. His voice hardened. Claire said, you were loaded. Money's not an issue for you. Money was never the issue, I said. Trust what? I stood up, pausing at the door. One more thing. When Claire moved out, she took some of my stuff. Family photos, Another of my father's clocks. Things money can't replace. He stared at me for a long moment. I'll see what I can do. The next day, a courier delivered a box to my hotel. Family photos, my father's other clock, and a few keepsakes. No note. I set them beside my father's clock on the desk, feeling like I'd reclaimed a piece of myself. But I didn't stop there. I called Tom, confirming the bank had started repossessing Harmon Fitness's equipment. Claire called 10 more times that day, but I didn't answer. She texted, "James, you're destroying everything. Please, talk to me." I didn't reply. Instead, I drove down I-80, pulling into Waterworks Park. The 45-degree Fahrenheit breeze carried the smell of hay. I sat on a wooden bench by the Des Moines River, thinking about the last 15 years. Claire once called me a boring numbers guy, but she didn't understand that numbers tell stories people try to hide, and her story was over. Justice doesn't need to be loud. When it was all over, I didn't feel victorious. I just felt free. I sat on a wooden bench at Waterworks Park, watching the Des Moines River flow quietly in the 45-degree Fahrenheit chill. The breeze carried the scent of hay from distant fields, and my father's clock ticked steadily on my wrist, as if reminding me that time had done its job. Claire and Ryan had started to pay the price. Accounts frozen, Ryan's gym facing repossession, and the truth about what they'd done laid bare in the light. I didn't need to shout to prove I was right. The truth had done that for me, and now it was time to close the book. Not with vicious revenge, but with dignity. The way my father always lived. Hey everyone, this is Revenge with Ethan, and we're back with the next chapter of James Whitaker's story. After exposing his wife Claire's fraud, and her boyfriend Ryan Caldwell's schemes, James made them face the consequences without raising his voice. Now he's ready to wrap things up with integrity, reclaim what's his, and move forward. Watch how he does it, and if you think James deserves his freedom after all this, drop the word freedom in the comments below. 3 weeks after the confrontation at my office, I sat in a conference room at the Des Moines courthouse, across from Claire and her lawyer. The air was sterile, with fluorescent lights glaring down on a polished wooden table. Claire looked tired, her expensive makeup unable to hide the dark circles under her eyes. She wore a business suit instead of her usual yoga gear, but her gaze was still sharp, like she was clinging to whatever pride she had left. I glanced at my father's clock, feeling the same calm I got from reviewing a flawless spreadsheet. Claire's lawyer, a middle-aged man with a slick voice, spoke first. "My client is willing to negotiate the division of assets," he said, sliding a stack of papers across the table, despite the aggressive tactics employed by Mr. Whitaker. Tom, my lawyer, gave a faint smile. "That's good to hear, because we have an update." He pushed another document toward them. "The bank has completed its investigation. They've confirmed Miss Sullivan forged Mr. Whitaker's signature on multiple loan documents, using marital assets as collateral without his consent." Claire's lawyer skimmed the pages, his face paling. "We'll need time to review, of course," Tom cut in, his tone even. "But you should know the bank has already referred the matter to the district attorney. This meeting is a courtesy, before criminal charges are filed." Claire stared at me, eyes wide. "Criminal charges? James, are you serious?" I met her gaze, my voice steady. "I didn't file them. The bank did. That's what happens when you commit loan fraud." Her lawyer whispered something in her ear. Claire shook her head fiercely. "No, I'm not agreeing to this." Tom continued, unfazed. "If Miss Sullivan signs the proposed settlement today, Mr. Whitaker is prepared to provide a statement to the bank that could mitigate the criminal implications. He won't pursue charges for the theft of personal property or the unauthorized transfer from the joint account." Claire looked at me, as if waiting for a sign I'd back down, but she saw nothing but resolve. She'd expected anger, jealousy, maybe even begging, anything but consequences. I said, my voice low but clear. "The settlement's fair, Claire. You keep the yoga studio, which has always been profitable. You keep your car and personal belongings, no alimony, and you take responsibility for the debts you incurred in my name." "What about Ryan?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Tom answered for me. "Mr. Caldwell's financial issues are his own, but without Mr. Whitaker's assets backing those loans, I understand the bank has already started repossession proceedings." Claire stared at the table, her hands clenched. After a long silence, she picked up the pen, her signature shaky on the papers. As we left the conference room, she grabbed my arm, her voice low. "I never thought you'd fight back like this, James. You always just went along with everything." "That was my choice," I said, pulling my arm free. "Just like this was yours." I walked away without looking back. The next day, I got word from Tom that Claire's yoga studio was under bank scrutiny due to its ties to Ryan's loans. She tried to sell it, but no one wanted a business linked to fraud. Harmon Fitness officially shut down, its equipment repossessed, and Ryan, according to a mutual acquaintance, had moved to Miami to start over. I didn't care much. They weren't my problem anymore. I went to the storage unit Claire had sent my stuff to, using the code she'd texted initially. Inside I found a few more keepsakes, a book my father gave me, family photos from Sailorville Lake, and an old letter from my mom. I took them back to the hotel, setting them beside my father's clock on the desk. For the first time in months I felt a weight lift, like I'd reclaimed not just objects but a piece of myself. A week later, I moved out of the hotel and bought a small craftsman-style house in Sherman Hill, near downtown Des Moines. It wasn't the big place Claire always wanted, just a simple home with a front porch and a backyard big enough for a few trees. I liked its rawness, the walls that needed repainting, the creaky hardwood floors. It felt like a project, something to keep my hands busy and my mind clear. Mark came over to help me install new kitchen cabinets one Saturday afternoon. We worked in silence, just the sound of the tape measure and drill breaking the quiet. "Heard anything from Claire?" Mark asked, holding a board while I screwed it in. "Nope," I said, wiping sweat from my brow. "And I don't expect to. You could have taken her for everything, you know," Mark said. "The fraud alone would have ensured that." "What's the point?" I said, shrugging. "She's not my problem anymore." Mark nodded, and we kept working. The radio in the corner played Johnny Cash's Man in Black, and I thought of Dad, how he always chose the right path, even when it was hard. Claire had called me a boring numbers guy, but I wondered if she ever realized that honesty, however dull, outlasts anything flashy. One evening, I sat on my new porch, sipping bourbon in the 50-degree Fahrenheit chill. The neighborhood was quiet, with only the occasional dog bark or kids' laughter from next door. It was nothing like the upscale Jordan Creek area Claire insisted on, where everything had to be perfect. This felt realer, like me now. I thought about the last 15 years, how I'd let Claire define my life, how I'd seen the signs of betrayal, but chose to ignore them. How I'd still prepared because I knew this day would come. I didn't feel triumphant or smug. I just felt free, like I'd shed an invisible burden. They thought I'd break. I thought glancing at my father's clock in the dim light, but they were wrong. Freedom isn't a destination. It's the journey I started when I decided no one would define me anymore. I sat on the front porch of my new home in Sherman Hill, sipping bourbon in the 50-degree Fahrenheit chill, feeling a peace I hadn't known for 15 years. My father's clock rested on the table beside me, its scratched face catching the glow of the porch light, as if reminding me of the lessons he left behind: honesty, patience, and dignity. Claire and Ryan had paid their price. She lost her yoga studio. He lost his gym. And both were now just faint shadows in my past. I'd signed the divorce papers, reclaimed my keepsakes, and moved into this house, not to gloat over victory, but to start anew. Justice had been served, not through anger, but through truth. And the truth had led me here to a place I finally called home. Hey everyone, this is Revenge with Ethan, and we're at the final chapter of James Whitaker's story. After making Claire and Ryan face the consequences of their betrayal, James closed the past with dignity, took back what was his, and found freedom. Thank you all for joining us on this emotional journey. Stick around to see how his story wraps up, and if you're rooting for James to embrace his new life, drop the word "new start" in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss our next tale of justice. Every morning, I woke up in my small craftsman-style house in Sherman Hill, hearing birds chirping outside, and the smell of coffee from my French press filling the kitchen. The house wasn't big, just 2 bedrooms, a front porch with wooden chairs, and a backyard big enough for a couple of oak trees if I felt like planting them. The hardwood floors creaked under my steps, and the living room walls still needed a fresh coat of paint, but I liked it that way. It was real, not polished like the Jordan Creek house Claire insisted we buy, where everything had to be perfect to impress the neighbors. Here, I didn't need to impress anyone. I drove through downtown Des Moines each day, past the state capitol glowing in the early sun, past the Des Moines River shimmering like a silver ribbon. My office in West Des Moines was the same as ever: cubicles, an old coffee machine, and Susan chatting about last weekend's Hawkeyes game. But now, I walked in with a different feeling. No more weight of a broken marriage. No more nights wondering if I'd done the right thing. I had done the right thing, not because I was smarter than Claire, but because I chose the truth. One afternoon, I sat at Java Joe's on 4th Street, sipping an Americano, and reading an email from Tom, my lawyer. Claire had moved to Chicago, trying to start over, but her yoga studio had been fully seized by the bank. Ryan Caldwell, rumor had it, was working as a personal trainer in Miami, but no one mentioned his no limits gym anymore. I closed my laptop, glancing at my father's clock on my wrist. They thought I'd fall apart. I thought, as if speaking to him, but I'm still here. Mark came by one weekend, bringing a 6-pack and some tools to help me fix the backyard fence. We worked under the 60-degree Fahrenheit sun, sweat dripping, but neither of us complaining. Mark was always like that, quiet, but there when I needed him. You ever think about reaching out to Claire? Mark asked, holding a board while I hammered nails. Nope, I said, pounding steadily. She's the past. Fair enough. You gave her a chance, Mark said, shrugging. More than she deserved. It's not about chances, I said, pausing to wipe my hands. It's about how I want to live. I don't need her to lose for me to feel like I've won. Mark nodded, and we kept working. The radio in the corner played Johnny Cash's I Walk the Line, and I thought of Dad, how he always took the straight path, even when it wasn't easy. Claire had called me a boring numbers guy, but that boring steadiness was what kept me grounded. Numbers don't lie, and neither do I. One Tuesday evening, my mom, Margaret, called from Ankeny. You doing okay, James? She asked, her voice warm and steady as ever. I'm good, Mom, I said, sitting in an armchair in the living room, eyeing the family photo on the shelf. I'm finding myself again. I'm proud of you, she said, and I could hear her smile through the phone. Your dad would be proud too. You didn't let them drag you down. I chuckled softly. Learn from the best. After the call, I stepped into the backyard, gazing at the stars twinkling over Des Moines. I thought of Dad, days he taught me to fix cars in his garage, how he balanced the shop's books with a pencil, and what he said when we fished at Sailorville Lake. James, son, don't let anyone make you forget who you are. I'd forgotten for a while, letting Claire define my life. But now I remembered. I started working more with Mark, helping him set up a small cybersecurity firm in Cedar Rapids, 120 miles from Des Moines. It wasn't about the money. My accounting firm was doing fine, but because I liked the feeling of building something again. We planned a fishing trip to Minnesota for the summer. Just me and Mark, like when we were kids with Dad. I pictured myself by a lake, cool breeze blowing. No burdens beyond picking the right lure. One morning I drove down I-80 toward the office, the radio playing Johnny Cash's Folsom Prison Blues. Iowa stretched out around me, golden cornfields, cloudless blue sky. I thought about the last 15 years, the times I saw Claire's betrayal coming, but stayed silent. The nights I built contingency plans, not out of suspicion, but instinct. Claire thought I'd crumble when she left, that I'd beg or destroy her out of spite. She didn't understand I didn't need to. Justice wasn't about making others lose. It was about living true to myself. I pulled into Waterworks Park, walking to the edge of the Des Moines River. The morning sun glinted off the water, casting sparkles like tiny stars. I held my father's clock, feeling its weight in my hand. It wasn't just an object. It was a reminder of what I'd learned from him. The truth always wins, if you're patient enough to let it. I'd been patient, and I'd won. Not by stooping low, but by standing tall. They underestimated me, I thought, a faint smile crossing my lips, and that was their mistake. I walked back to my truck, heading for I-80, Johnny Cash's voice filling the cab. My new house in Sherman Hill waited for me, with its porch, its backyard, and a life no one else defined. Freedom wasn't a destination. It was the journey.